home inspection in Calgary costs anywhere between $400 to $600. That's it. And $400 to $600 can save you from buying a home with a $30,000 foundation problem, a $15,000 roof replacement, or an electrical system that's a fire hazard. I've seen all three. But here's the thing, an inspection is only as useful as your ability to understand what it's telling you. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the red flags that actually matter in a Calgary home inspection, what's specific to this market and this climate, and how to use the inspection to negotiate better terms or to make a confident decision to walk away. Let's get into it. Quick note before we start, if you're in the process of buying in Calgary and you want someone who understands build quality and what to watch for in this specific market, reach out to me. My contact information and free home buyer guide are in the description. Okay, let's talk about the red flags. Before I get into the specific red flags, let me give you some context about why Calgary homes have some unique inspection considerations that you might not be used to if you're coming from Ontario or BC. Calgary's climate is extreme in ways that are hard to fully appreciate until you've lived here. The freeze-thaw cycles here are significant. We could go from minus 25 to plus 15 within the same week during Chinook events. That temperature swinging is genuinely hard on building materials, foundations, roofing, and mechanical systems. Water gets into places, freezes, expands, and causes damage that accumulates over years. We can also get significant hail events in Calgary. The city is actually one of the most hail-prone urban areas in Canada. Roofs take a beating on a regular cycle, and insurance claims from hail damages are common. Knowing when a roof was last replaced and whether it was replaced due to hail is an important context. And Calgary homes, particularly those built during the boom years of the late 1970s through the 1990s, have some specific materials and construction practices that a good inspector will know what to check for. Let's start with the big one. Foundation issues are the most serious red flag in any home inspection, and in Calgary they come up more often than most buyers realize. Here's what most people don't know about Calgary foundations. Foundation cracks are actually quite common in the city. The clay-heavy soil that underlines much of Calgary expands when wet and contracts when dry, and that movement puts stress on foundations over time. So seeing some cracks in a Calgary foundation is not an automatic deal breaker. What separates it is the type, location, and the size of those cracks. Hairline vertical cracks are generally considered a lower concern. They happen as concrete cures and settles. Horizontal cracks are more serious because they indicate lateral pressure on the wall, which can mean the foundation is being pushed inward. Any crack that's actively leaking water or growing over time or accompanied by bowing walls is a serious concern that warrants a specialist opinion before you can proceed. If your inspector flags foundation concerns, don't panic and don't dismiss them. Get a structural engineer's opinion. That typically costs a few $100s and gives you a professional assessment on the severity and what remediation would cost. Armed with that information, you can negotiate with the seller or make an informed decision to simply walk away. Here's something most out-of-province buyers don't think to ask about in Calgary. Has the roof been replaced? And if so, what was the reason why? Calgary is going to be one of the more hail-prone cities in Canada, and significant hail events can strip those granules from the asphalt shingles, which compromise the roof's integrity and lead to leaks that develop gradually over months or years. A roof can look adequate on the surface, but be significantly degraded from the hail impact that happened 2 summers ago. A good inspector will assess the condition of the shingles, look for granule loss in the gutters and around the downspouts, check the flashing around the chimneys and the roof penetrations, and flag any areas of concern. But for older homes or homes in areas that have had significant recent hail events, a specific roofing inspection or a drone assessment may be worth it for an additional cost. You have to ask the seller directly, has this roof ever had an insurance claim? Has it been replaced? If so, when and by whom? A roof replaced by a reputable contractor with proper permits after a city hail event is actually positive. A roof that's 20 years old with no replacement history on a home that's been through multiple Calgary hail seasons is a risk you need to price into your offer. Attic ventilation and insulation issues are one of the most common findings in Calgary inspections, and one that out-of-province buyers rarely think to ask about. Here's why it matters in this climate. When warm, humid air from inside the house rises and meets the cold underside of a poorly insulated or poorly ventilated roof in the winter, you get condensation. That condensation builds up, leading to moisture damage and eventually mold. In Calgary's winters, this is real and a reoccurring issue in homes where the attic hasn't been properly maintained or upgraded. Signs your inspector will look for include condensation staining on the underside of the roof deck, inadequate insulation depth, blocked soffit vents, and evidence of past or current mold growth. Any of these findings need to be taken seriously. Remediating attic mold and upgrading insulation or ventilation could run anywhere from a few $1,000s to significantly more depending on the extent of the problem. Electrical issues are common in older Calgary homes and have safety implications beyond just the cost. This is where most people get this wrong. They see electrical flag in their inspection report and they assume it's just a minor item. Sometimes it is, sometimes it absolutely isn't. In Calgary homes built before the mid-1990s, there are a few specific electrical issues that come up regularly. Older wiring that's not up to current code, including aluminum wiring, which was used extensively in homes built in the late 1960s through the 1970s, which poses a fire risk if not properly managed. Electrical panels that are undersized for modern usage or contain known problematic brands. Outlets near water sources that aren't GFCI protected, and DIY electrical work that was done without permits and doesn't meet code. None of these are necessarily deal breakers, but they need to be understood and priced appropriately. Having a licensed electrician assess any flagged electrical concerns gives you a real repair cost estimate that you can use in your negotiation. And if the inspector flags any aluminum wiring specifically, get an electrician's opinion on the remediation options before you commit. Water infiltration is the issue that causes the most long-term damage in Calgary homes, and one that's often the hardest to fully assess in a standard inspection. On the exterior, grading and drainage matter enormously in Calgary. The ground around the foundation should slope away from the house, directing water away rather than pooling up against the foundation wall. Downspouts should discharge well away from the foundation. In homes where the grading has settled over time or where the landscape has been changed, water can be directed towards the foundation rather than away from it. That's a persistent problem that leads to basement moisture and eventually foundation damage. On the interior, look for efflorescence on the basement walls, which is a white mineral deposit that indicate water has been moving through the concrete, staining around the windows or at the base of the walls. Musty smells in the basement. Fresh paint in a basement can sometimes mask staining, which is why a good inspector will use a moisture meter rather than relying on a visual inspection alone. Any evidence of past or current water infiltration in the basement needs to be understood before you commit. Calgary winters are cold enough that a furnace failure is not just an inconvenience, it's a health and a safety issue. Knowing the age and the condition of the mechanical systems before you buy it is essential. In Calgary, a furnace has a typical lifespan of 15 to 20 years. If the furnace in the home you're buying is 18 years old, you're likely buying a furnace replacement within the next few years. That's $5,000 to $10,000 that you need to factor into your decision. Your inspector should assess the furnace for age, condition, heat exchanger integrity, and any visible concerns. A cracked heat exchanger specifically is a safety issue because it can allow carbon monoxide to enter the living space. Hot water tanks typically last 10 to 12 years. Central air conditioning units last around 15 years. Ask the seller for documentation when major mechanical systems were replaced. If that documentation doesn't exist, your inspector's assessment and the visible age of the equipment are your best guides. Any system that's near or past its expected lifespan is a negotiating point. This one applies specifically to homes built before the early 1990s, and it's something Calgary buyers need to be aware of. Asbestos was used extensively in building materials up into the late 1980s. Insulation, ceiling tiles, floor coverings, pipe insulation, and drywall compounds in homes of that era can contain asbestos. Asbestos that is intact and undisturbed is not an immediate health concern, but asbestos that has been disturbed during a renovation or that's in a deteriorating condition is a serious hazard. A standard home inspection does not include asbestos testing. If you're buying a Calgary home built before 1990, especially if there's been evidence of a renovation, an asbestos assessment by a qualified company is worth the additional cost. Similarly, homes built before 1978 may have had lead-based paint, particularly on older woodwork and window frames. Again, intact lead paint is manageable. Deteriorating lead paint, or lead paint that's going to be disturbed during planned renovations though, could be a health risk, particularly for families with young children. So you have the inspection done, you now have a 50-page report in your hands. Here's how to think about what's in it. Not every item in an inspection report is a red flag. Inspectors are required to document everything they observe, including minor maintenance items that are completely normal for a home of any age. A good way to approach the report, though, is to categorize findings into 3 buckets. Safety issues, which need to be addressed regardless of the cost, major systems or structural concerns, which you may need a cost estimate before you can make a decision, and minor items which are useful to know but not necessarily negotiating points. When it comes to negotiation, you don't have to ask the seller to fix everything. In fact, asking for too many repairs can create friction unnecessarily. Focus your negotiation on the items that are significant in cost or safety. Get those quotes if necessary from contractors on those specific items and present that information clearly. A seller is much more likely to negotiate on a specific documented cost than on a vague request to fix many things. And sometimes a price reduction is cleaner than asking for repairs because you control who does the work and how they do it. Those are the red flags that matter the most in a Calgary home inspection. Knowing what to look for before you get to that point puts you in a much stronger position as a buyer. If you haven't watched my video on the biggest mistakes people make when buying in Calgary, that's the one I'm going to pair with this. It covers builder quality and contract issues in detail. I'll link it right here. And if you want to talk through a specific property or a situation, my free home buyer guide and Calendly link are both in the description below. Happy to help. I'll see you in the next one.